welcome to the Geek Therapy Radio podcast. You've got your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger. I am still alive. I have not recorded any new content for the show in actual, literal weeks. And I've felt the tug. There have been some things going on in the geeky tech world that got me excited. One thing in particular that I will tell you about: a potential new MacBook, not MacBook Pro, not MacBook Air, but a old-fashioned, more affordable. I will say. I was about to say budget, more affordable MacBook. Like the outgoing MacBook 12-inch MacBooks that, man, they went away years ago. And I, for one, have been just jonesing. Since we have not had a new MacBook, just a regular MacBook, since Apple transitioned to its own in-house silicon, the M1 chip. Since the M1 chip, we have not had a just bog standard MacBook. We've had M1 or M-powered MacBook Airs, M-powered MacBook Pros. Of course, everything is powered by Apple's ARM processors now, which is amazing, which is wonderful, which is beautiful, which has been a boon for the tech world, the computer space, especially mobile computers since then. But no MacBook yet. That is about to change. There are very credible rumors from several outlets and leakers who have seen Apple's, internal code, programming, whatever they see, internal documents, and they say, "Oh, what is this? This little ID here within the code or within this document that could mean, and probably does likely mean, a MacBook is on the horizon soon." I wanted to say real quick before we get into more MacBook stuff, if you are trying to get more of me, to hear me more often, very similar to Geek Therapy Radio, I record a podcast and produce a podcast at least once a month minimum for the Houston Museum of Natural Science. So type into your podcast player HMNS Beyond Bones Podcast, and that is how you can hear me much more often, at least once a month. And these episodes of the HMNS Beyond Bones podcast are quite a lot more in depth than Geek Therapy Radio, where I just get on here and kind of go off the cuff mostly. But for the museum, obviously, it's much more highly produced. It is still me in charge of everything of that podcast. I host it, I edit it, I produce it, I choose the subjects, I schedule with guests and experts. So if you want to hear me more often and just want to keep track of what I'm doing way more frequently, subscribe to the HMNS Beyond Bones podcast. Look for the purple color scheme. That is, the thumbnail is purple currently. That is how you know you've got the correct podcast. There is an old version of the Beyond Bones podcast that I think ended in like 2020. That's not it. That's a different host. That's my good friend Craig Lavati, who hosted that podcast. And it may have had a different host before then. But I'm just telling y'all, if you want to get the HMNS Beyond Bones podcast in its current form, type in HMNS Beyond Bones podcast in your favorite podcast player, Spotify, Spreaker, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts, it's in there. I personally use Pocket Casts for Android. I'm sure you can use the iHeartRadio app, all that good stuff. But I'll, of course, put the link in the description of this podcast. I'll put the Spotify link. If anything, you can just kind of see, oh, that's what the thumbnail looks like. Anyways, back to the MacBook. I don't want to call it the 12-inch MacBook because it may not be a 12-inch MacBook. I hope that it is. The rumors now that are swirling is that it could be, it could be a 12-inch MacBook, which I'm all here for, even with my bad eyes and the kind of necessity at some point, sometimes for me to need a bigger screen. I kind of still am hoping that the new MacBook, the new A18 powered MacBook would stay in that kind of 12-inch form factor. It's just, I also like small, sleek things, and that is, I always liked the form factor of the 12-inch MacBook. I always loved the form factor of it. So we'll see if the new MacBook is 12 inches or 13.3 inches. I lean towards I lean towards 13 inches or 13.3 inches, and a form factor that is not much bigger than the old outgoing 12-inch MacBook, which is totally fine with me. I'm also totally fine with the inevitable reduction in the amount of ports. I would not be surprised in the absolute slightest if the new MacBook, the A18 chip powered MacBook, we'll talk about that A18 chip here in a minute, but I would not be surprised at all if it's just one Thunderbolt 5 port, or maybe even Thunderbolt 4, probably Thunderbolt 5, maybe not even Thunderbolt, maybe it's just USB Type-C, whatever. One port, one Type-C shaped port on the MacBook. I would be honestly genuinely surprised if it even has a headphone jack. The thing about the MacBooks is it's not, that's kind of par for the course, and it's kind of accepted. I love having all the ports in the known universe on my devices, obviously, but with something like the MacBook that is supposed to be stripped down, slimmed down, smallest possible, cheapest new product possible from Apple as far as portable computer, as far as laptops at least, or notebooks are concerned, I just wouldn't be surprised in the slightest if it's just one single Type-C port, whether that's Thunderbolt 5 or Thunderbolt at all. I don't know, but it's not a deal breaker for me. And I'll say right now, depending on the price, if I am very interested if Apple releases this. I make no shame about it. If you followed me on social media at all since 2017, since I started Geek Therapy Radio, if you follow me at all, you've heard me say, or you've seen me write from time to time, but multiple times over the years, hey, Apple, please bring back the MacBook. In fact, this is a good segue to talk about the A18 chip. I asked Apple I threw my voice into the ether. I said, Apple, take any M1 chips you have left over, even the bottom of the barrel, lowest binned M1 chips with only a 7-core GPU as opposed to an 8-core GPU for the higher binned M1 chips. Take all those low binned M1 chips and just toss them in a 12-inch MacBook or a 13-inch MacBook. Revive the MacBook and just put the M1 processor in there. Easy, and then sell it for $700, whatever the final price point may be. You know you've got extra M1 chips laying around, the low bin chips, just toss them in there. You're still putting out, through Walmart, they still sell M1 powered MacBook Airs at Walmart. You can, in the United States, you can go to walmart.com and buy new MacBook Airs with the M1 chip in it. So they still have the M1 chips. I don't know if they're still producing the M1 chips, but they still have M1 chips. Either way, it's 4 generations old by now, but it's still an absolute kick-A chip, kick-ASS chip. So my vote was, and what I've said through the years, tweeting out to Apple, just put those bottom of the barrel, low binned M1 chips in a new MacBook, 12-inch or 13-inch, and we'll be happy. We'll be right as rain. So the A18 chip, this is what would be going into the MacBook. It gets confusing because the technical name for the chip is the A18 Pro. So it would be an A18 Pro MacBook. And tell me that's not the most confusing combination of letters and words possible to introduce into a MacBook lineup. Oh, do you have the MacBook Pro? No, I have the A18 Pro MacBook. What does that mean? So anyways, I don't know if it's going to be called the A18 Pro MacBook. They might even call the chip inside there something completely different by the time this, if and when, comes out. But it is looking very likely that this will come out. I'll be surprised if it doesn't come out. They're saying by late 2025, early 2026. Apple has been missing a more affordable, I hate to say budget. You're going to see the word budget all over the place in terms of a MacBook. The two words, Apple and budget, only make sense at the grocery store. In the tech world, Apple and budget is like oil and water. It doesn't make sense. The only time you could even think about attributing the word budget in the same sentence as an Apple product, as an Apple computer at least, is if you buy a used M1 MacBook Air like I did. You can get those between $500 and $600 now, and it's the deal of the century as far as MacBooks as Macs are concerned, because the M1 chip still absolutely slays even 5 years after its release. And I said that. I said the M1 is so good that it's going to be hard to convince Apple customers to upgrade generation to generation, because they're going to sit on their M1 or M2 and say, this is almost as good as an M3 or M4. So I think maybe, I cannot verify this, I just had the feeling that more Mac owners, notebook Mac owners, and even like Mac Studio, like Mac owners, period, I think are, in my opinion, I wouldn't be surprised if they are waiting longer between upgrades. I have my MacBook Pro 16-inch with the M1 Pro in there. I have my MacBook Air with the bog standard M1 in there, and they are both absolutely stellar. The A18 chip, though it is technically less cores than the M1, it still outperforms the M1, and especially in single core. The single cores of the A18 Pro chip are better than the single core performance in the 5-year-old M1 chip. In the A18 Pro, there are 2 performance cores and 4 efficiency cores. The A18 chip is in their flagship smartphones. So the iPhone, whatever, the latest iPhone, it has the A18 Pro chip in it, or the A18 chip in it at least. So this is and that's a good point. The A18 chip, this is going to be the first Apple laptop to use a mobile phone or a tablet processor. And someone made a good point in one of these articles that even for like the iPad Pro, iPad Pros use M chips in there. So this is it seems kind of like a weird move, but it actually does make a lot of sense. It seems like a weird move to put a phone or a tablet processor in something like a small form factor laptop, but it also makes all the effing sense in the universe to do so. The A18 chip with the 2 performance cores, 4 efficiency cores, and I believe it's 6 GPU cores, it's still going to outperform, at least slightly, all things considered, even video editing, and as far as the GPU is concerned. It's going to still be a little bit better than the M1 chip. So the A18 Pro has 6 CPU cores, as opposed to the M1 that has 8 CPU cores, but each core is newer. The A18 cores are much newer generations, different manufacturing process than the old M1. So I've actually got some Geekbench scores pulled up right in front of me, and I'm just going to compare the M1 multi-core to the A18 multi-core, because you know that the M2, M3, and M4 are going to absolutely annihilate the A18 or the M1. So let's just stick with the A18 Pro versus the M1 in a Geekbench 6 multi-core. So the M1 with 8 cores and an 8-core CPU, so that's 4 efficiency cores, 4 performance cores, and then you have the 8-core GPU. In Geekbench, that scored an 8453, 8,453 points in Geekbench 6. Going up to the A18 Pro with a 6-core CPU, that's 2 performance, 4 efficiency, and then the 6-core GPU, that's 2 less cores than the GPU on the M1. The A18 Pro chip scores 8,048. Actually, so take that back. According to Geekbench, in this Geekbench multi-core, the A18 performs slightly less than the M1. Even with a lot less cores to work with, the A18 Pro in multi-core is only slightly behind the M1 multi-core, even with the M1's more cores. That's very interesting. And one of my hopes is that the MacBook, I know some might not be surprised. I don't know. I would be surprised. RAM. Let's talk about RAM. That's what I mean getting at here. RAM. I would be somewhat surprised if the new MacBook, A18 powered MacBook, only comes with 8 gigabytes of RAM. I'd bet I might be a little surprised if the base model MacBook A18 powered MacBook has 16 gigabytes of RAM. I would be surprised if it didn't come out like that. But at the same time, I also wouldn't be surprised if the most low tier model is only 8 gigs. It just seems like in the year 2025 or 2026, whenever this winds up coming out, that just seeing a product on a page that says 8 gigabytes of RAM is going to be kind of, wow, it's going to make people's eye open. But here's the thing. M Silicon, the architecture of current Macs, it performs sorcery with the unified memory. It's 8 gigabytes for somebody just checking emails and doing office work and spreadsheets and this and that. I think 8 cores on a MacBook on M architecture is going to be just fine for those low-key tasks. 16 gigabytes is obviously way better for more intense workloads like video editing. Like the M1 chip, current M1 chip in my MacBook Air, my 13-inch MacBook Air, the video editing performance, I can only speak for DaVinci Resolve because that's what I use most often, is spectacular. No, it's not going to be on par with my RTX 3090 with 24 gigs of VRAM. And no, it's not going to be on par with my M1 Pro chip with more GPU cores. No, but for getting things done, just kind of making edits and even editing in 4K, 16 gigs with an M1 chip or 16 gigs with an A18 chip, it's still gonna get it done. It is still gonna be more than good enough for editing on the fly. The other reason why I'm excited for the A18 Pro chip in a MacBook is battery life, efficiency. I have no doubt in my mind that the MacBook with an A18 Pro chip is going to get simply staggering battery life. I have no reason to believe that it wouldn't perform so highly in that regard. I think it's going to be a lot of battery life. I think the base model is going to be 256 gigs. I don't think there's any way on God's green earth that they're going to offer a base model with 128 gigabytes of RAM. Then again, it's Apple. They might. I would just be very surprised if that's the case. So I'm very excited. I'm very excited for the potential and very likely new MacBook that may be coming out at the end of this year or the fourth quarter of this year or the first quarter or early on in 2026. The price point, in my opinion, I believe will be between 700 and spec'd up. Let's just talk base model. Let's talk base model. Because you can spec up anything to anything on Apple's website, but the base model I think is going to start at $699. Between $699 and $799 is where I think the new MacBook, the A18 powered MacBook, will fall. Any higher than that, and you start cannibalizing MacBook Air sales. So I think it's going to be $100 cheaper. It's most likely going to be $100 cheaper than a base model MacBook Air. It's just what I think. I don't know if that's actually going to be the case. We will see about that. All I know is this is going to be one of the first, Apple keynotes or Apple events, whatever, that I'm actually semi-excited about since 2020. The last time I was excited about an Apple event wasn't the Vision Pro or anything like that. It was 2020 when they officially announced the move to M Silicon. That was amazing. I was all about it. I was very excited to see that and hear that. This is the first time in 5 years that I'm excited to see what Apple has up their sleeves for their next announcements. I'd be very pleased to see a MacBook reintroduced to the lineup. It's a part of Apple's repertoire that is not currently being utilized at the moment. According to all these articles, Apple's they've sold less computers in the recent years as compared to previous years when they had more budget, quote unquote, models, more affordable models. So they're trying to bolster their sales of their notebooks. You know that it's going to have AI, this and that, and that's going to be all part of the hype and Apple AI and da-da-da-da-da, because you can't do anything. You can't announce anything. You can't talk about any new piece of hardware, computer hardware these days without throwing AI in there, throwing the word AI. So I'm excited about it. I am very excited. Yeah, depending on the price, if I'm all for it. Depending on the price, it may go in the old Amazon shopping cart. But if it starts out at like $1,000, which there's honestly no way it would, because MacBooks have always been the more affordable option from Apple. But if it's too much, if like Apple, what are you doing? There's no rule that says Apple won't introduce an ultra sleek, ultra portable, super tiny device and then add a little upcharge because of its portability and this and that. Start at $1,000. I don't want to say impossible for Apple to do that. Apple can do anything, and they're notorious for kind of gouging on things. Have you ever tried to upgrade? Go to the little spec out your laptop page of Apple and see how much they charge for RAM upgrades and memory upgrade and I almost said hard drive upgrades, storage upgrades. I think it's astronomical. It's highway robbery. Even MKBHD and Linus Tech Tips and all the big ones say it's all borderline criminal how much Apple charges for these kind of very minor upgrades. If you want to get a more powerful version of a product, it's just like $200 for 8 more gigabytes of RAM. That is utterly insane. Anyways, the other thing I wish, this is my last wish before I wrap up here because I got to go pick up my son. I wish Apple would, in whatever product, MacBook Pros, MacBook Air, or MacBook, I'm totally fine with a plastic option or carbon fiber. Carbon fiber would cost a lot more money, but when I pick up my MacBook Pro, my 16-inch MacBook Pro, the aluminum is beautiful. The machined aluminum is absolutely gorgeous. Obviously, that's one of the aesthetics is one of the things that Apple is known for. But there is a monster amount of weight in that beauty. And I wish that Apple would offer a MacBook Pro or MacBook Air, or even a MacBook with a plastic option, just with a lighter plastic. Carbon fiber even carbon fiber costs more money. Just having the option of that weight savings, it would be an absolute boon. And I probably am not the only one. If you're listening right now, it probably makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Maybe plastic isn't as aesthetic, doesn't look as good or feel as good as the machined aluminum, but the weight savings are worth it. I would buy a plastic MacBook or a plastic MacBook Air or a plastic MacBook Pro the next time I'm looking to upgrade that kind of hardware. I would go for the plastic option because the weight savings is incredibly important to me. Anyways, thank you for listening to this episode of the Geek Therapy Radio podcast. Check the link in the description for the link to the podcast that I do much more regularly for the Houston Museum of Natural Science, the HMNS Beyond Bones podcast. And remember that you are worthy of love. You're worthy of giving love, and you're worthy of receiving love, and you're worthy of your own self-respect. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll talk to y'all next time. Peace out.